hear my guest here, so let's go to my guest. We are joined with the man himself, Michael Maloof. How you doing, my man? You doing okay today?
So far, so good.
Good. Michael Maloof, he is former Senior Security Policy Analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service in the Department of Defense. Michael, I'm glad you could join me, man.
Well, thank you.
Give me your take on the Alaska Putin-Trump meeting. I'm very curious on your thoughts on this.
Well, it's going to be bilat for sure, and it will be with Putin and Trump only, and it will be it's really meant to try and renew the relationship, the diplomatic relationship. That is the real overarching geostrategic interest of Trump. It isn't necessarily Ukraine. It isn't the Europeans. As far as he's concerned, he wants to do other things with Putin. He's hoping that, and you're already seeing that Trump is criticizing Zelensky for not going along with what Trump has laid out as the deal, and even though. And he says Zelensky says he refuses to negotiate. So it's really a toss-up right now on just which way it goes. But I think, frankly, Putin's holding all the cards. He's
no, please finish. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think Putin is holding all the cards, and I think that Zelensky is going to be left with very little choice. But he has no bargaining chips himself. His back is up against the wall, and he now he's referring back to legal claims that he cannot negotiate land confiscation to the Russians because it's constitutionally forbidden. Even though the Rada could change the law tomorrow, it's not like our constitutional process. So he's obviously hoping that the Europeans, that is Zelensky, is hoping for the Europeans to come through with helping him to continue the war. He continues to lob in drones. There was another attack overnight, so he's been unrelenting in that regard. And I think Trump realizes that Zelensky just cannot, will not go along with anything. I think that's basically what's happening. And it's going to be something that Putin will ultimately come out okay on. But I think the Europeans will look for ways to try to continue the war effort. But Trump basically wants out, and he's finished with it. I think he's finished with Europe, and I think he's finished with NATO.
You think Trump is finished with NATO? Oh, yeah. I don't think Trump is finished with NATO. I don't even think Trump is finished with Europe. I think he's okay. Well, let's step through it first. Have you noticed that one of the things they haven't been talking about in these states, because it seems like Europe and the U.S. have been just talking to each other, like the media. They haven't. Russia's been very quiet on this front because they tend to do negotiations in private. They haven't been talking about NATO expansion, which is the main thing that started the war in the first place.
Yeah,
that's weird. It's almost like they keep using this term swaps. Okay, well, those areas are part of the Russian constitution at this point. What do you mean swaps? Like the situation for Ukraine is getting worse.
Yeah, you have a case here where the Europeans, particularly, and even Zelensky, cannot wake up to the reality of things. But now it's crunch time. They've been kicking the can. They've been getting, as long as they were getting supplies and ordnance, in which our own stockpiles now have basically been depleted. He was content to carry on. Well, that's coming to an end. All these things come to an end eventually, and I think he's reaching that point now. So that's why this is going to be a very critical meeting on Friday, and you're going to see some major changes. The Europeans are still hoping against hope, but their whole basis for promising what they can't deliver to Zelensky is really based upon the U.S. backing them up. They can't
Yeah.
do it. They can't afford it. They can't afford the arms to Europe, and in addition, a lot of these arms that they want, particularly the missiles, more sophisticated missiles, will take years to build. It isn't like it's going to be an overnight shipment of this mass amounts of, um, of patriots or anything. We're short, and the Europeans are short, and they have to think of their own defenses, just like the U.S. is. And I think what Trump really has in mind is something even larger in terms of trying to renew the relationship with Russia. I think he will look toward trying to work out bilateral deals with them, particularly in the Arctic, and also maybe renewing a form of the Intermediate Range Ballistic Missile Treaty. So I think that these are considerations. These are larger geostrategic issues that Trump envisions, rather than just being dealing with the Ukraine issue, which is holding up everything else.
How could Russia trust anything coming out of the U.S.?
Can't. They can't. I mean, we have violated every agreement. There were 6 agreements, and I've pinpointed them in the past that led in which there would be no NATO expansion. Well, things happen, and that indivisibility is what the word is that they used, and that means you don't arm the West at the expense of the East. I mean, that's basically fundamentally what's occurred. And when you've got NATO countries now right on the border, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, they're really sort of insignificant in terms of any military power. But the fact is that they're there, and Ukraine, of course, would be the major problem. And then you have Belarus, and that's why you're seeing now Putin looking to put the Oreshniks in Belarus.
Yeah. And then they tried to overthrow Georgia.
And London will only be like 5 minutes away from being hit by these Oreshniks if they decide to put their own troops into Ukraine or whatever. Then they become fair game. So
Trump just sent nukes, gravity nukes to the UK.
I know he's put in tactical nukes. They're at Lakenheath, but RAF Lakenheath was a sister base of ours at one time. That when I was there, yeah, I was at RAF Alconbury and Lakenheath in Alconbury. They're a cluster of bases in the East Anglia area, in the Middlesex area, and we used to joke that UK was nothing more than an American aircraft carrier. With all the bases we had.
Oh, that's funny. They tried to overthrow Georgia to use it as a second front. That was the other thing. That was something recent that happened this year. Was it this year? I think it was this year, or maybe last year. But either way, I guess I'm saying I agree with you. I don't know how you trust the U.S. in this context. And so how do you...
Well, that's the whole thing. The element of trust is gone, and the Russians have made no secret of that. They can't, any country at this point that wants to make an agreement with the U.S., they're going to have to think twice, maybe 3 times. Look, we're even sanctioning allies.
Yeah.
We're even sanctioning the developing countries because they happen to be a member of BRICS. Are you kidding me?
I guess
that's what, and Trump is threatening that.
How do you make a deal without it turning out to be Minsk 3?
You can't. Trump is basically declaring economic warfare against the world with his sanctions threats and tariffs. Yeah. And that's why you're seeing the development of a multipolar world order for that very reason. And it is very real. And they're beginning like India. India thought it was a good buddy of the United States until it got slapped with those tariffs. Well, that's economic warfare in their minds. And they happen to be a member of BRICS, a prominent member of BRICS, one of the founding members. And Trump has threatened all these sanctions on all these countries that belong to BRICS. That's secondary sanctions. That's in addition to any country that trades with Russia. And you can't sustain that.
I guess what I'm getting at is from the standpoint of making, let's say, a deal, Minsk 3, I guess, you've had Minsk 1 and 2. Minsk 22, Angela Merkel came out, effectively admitted I lied, and they used it to build up a huge military, effectively saving Ukraine. Istanbul agreements, again, blown off. Boris Johnson comes in and blows it off. How do you prevent this from being Minsk 3? Like, that's the seem to be the difficult part. How do you ensure that there's no NATO expansion? How do you ensure that they don't provide intelligence, that they limit the military size? How do you, do you get my point? Like, you're trying to make a deal with somebody that is fundamentally dishonest in a country that's fundamentally dishonest in the way that it engages. How does Putin shake his hand and be confident that any of that goes through? That's assuming anything goes through in the first place. I'm very cynical about it.
The trust is broken. You had 2 U.S. presidents make that pledge to Russian leaders before Putin not to expand NATO, and a Secretary of State, James Baker. And yet they went ahead and did it anyway. And it was under Clinton that they began the expansion rule. So you can't trust. I think from the perspective of the Russians, they're going to think twice, and so they have to have some leverage, and that's what their leverage is going to be: an expansion and functioning, a viable functioning of BRICS to respond to the U.S. economic sanctions and threats, because it does constitute economic warfare. And even the members of BRICS, the partners, are beginning to poo-poo it. Trump thought, well, I'll launch all these tariffs on all these BRICS countries. Well, they're basically saying, well, we're just going to sidestep you. We don't need to trade with you. It's not absolutely essential. We'll trade with people within the Eurasian Union that we have established through BRICS. That's 40. That could be potentially 40 countries.
Yeah.
And they're trading in their own currency, so they bypass the use of the dollar, and then that diminishes the importance of the dollar over time. And that's what Trump is recoiling against, because under the Bretton Woods, I think in 47 or 49, it was supposed to be regarded as the world currency, the dollar, that is. And that seems to be, it's not going to go away, but it seems to be diminished a bit. And even over time, it's not going to go away, but it will be diminished if we continue along this trend. But they're still going to use the dollar. So with this alternative multipolar system, financial system, they're able to trade both in dollars and in and away from the SWIFT, not only in the SWIFT system, but in their own system under the new development bank that has been created under BRICS.
I see you're focusing on the tariffs or the sanctions.
Well, it's economics is everything.
It is, but you have a huge military that was on the Russian border that was trying to effectively just killed 100,000 Russians. Russia killed like 1.5 million of them. Meaning there's a military conflict that's taking place that Trump is trying to end. I understand your point about the economic sanctions, though. I do get it.
In terms of, I'm talking about terms of leverage. Where is the leverage in the future to keep people in line so that if they make an agreement, how do they retain that agreement?
I see.
Right now, there's no trust.
I see.
Consequently, you develop an alternative system to show them that, well, we can revert to this, and this is what is happening because we can't trust you any longer. And now there's a history of mistrust that is very profound. And I don't see how the Russians can really trust what even comes out of the agreement, if there is any agreement on Friday. And we've already seen how Zelensky is recoiling.
Yes.
He's not going along, notwithstanding whatever arrangement that he and Trump had made economically in terms of minerals and mineral exploitation, whatever. We don't even hear any discussion about that anymore.
I don't even know if they have it at this point. I mean, the lithium reserves, the stuff that Russia's been taking recently, it's been taking stuff off the board that belongs.
Well, the rare earths are mostly in the East anyway. I mean, in fact, that's where most of Ukraine's industrial might is exactly. In the East, not the West. But
I found this video apparently of Donald Trump trying to rough up Putin in order to get Putin to fall in line. It was a leaked audio file. I want to play it. I want to get your take on it.
Vladimir, if you don't end that war in Ukraine in 50 days, I'm going to do something very strong.
Oh God, this again. Okay, right, cool.
What's that? Cool? I'll show you cool. Now you have 10 days. Okay, maybe 12.
Love it, can't wait.
Okay, that's it.
Ow! Holy shit! Why did you hit me? Why did you hit me?
Look, somebody's going to pay the price for Vladimir not listening to me, and it's...
That video is the funniest thing in the world to me today. I swear it is. And that
But
is
it underscores what I've
Trump.
just been talking about.
Exactly. Exactly.
It underscores everything that I've just described. And by going after the partners to Russia, like India, he's managed success. Trump has managed successfully to piss off the Indians, and at the same time show his hand to Russia in terms of any negotiation. And but tariffs and sanctions at this point for Russia are almost meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go into Russia today, and I was there last October, November. You wouldn't think there was any sanctions.
You don't see them. And that is the funniest thing in the world because, as you pointed out, it is exactly what took place. He did not put the sanctions on China, the secondary sanctions.
Right.
And Vance was like, it's complicated.
There's a strategy that they're undertaking, which I think is based upon a false premise. The whole fundamental strategy is to embrace and ingratiate yourself toward, to work something out with Russia with the hope that they'll split from China. But China and Russia, we drove both of those countries into a virtual alliance. Military, economic, yeah, they got some issues back and forth, but fundamentally and predominantly, they're close, much closer than they were during the Cold War. We used to use China to spy on the then Soviet Union in the good old days, and they were cooperative.
Not anymore. And it seems that they're trying to push India closer and closer to.
And Russia. I mean, India today still takes most of its military equipment from Russia. There's been some changes, but it's predominantly there. Plus, they're in the neighborhood. The trade is there, and so and the same with China. You see Modi and Xi Jinping now are coming together to work out things, and notwithstanding their border dispute, and they're working closer. They're all members of BRICS. They're all members of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Uh-huh. So, and that has become a major economic and somewhat a military force, a Eurasian force to counteract the West. And it's being successful. And you're seeing that the Europeans are basically now being blocked out of China. And so where do they turn for their exports? European countries are basically an exporting country, but so that their economy is shot because of high costs for fuel, which they brought on themselves by voluntarily cutting off their cheap gas from Russia. So then they're buying LNG from the U.S. at far greater price, and we're draining them. And they don't like it, but they need the energy. And now we're not going to be far away from the fall and the winter when the colder seasons begin to come in, and they've got to be ready. So you got to have all these things are you have to project ahead of time. And the Europeans are only are only in a reaction mode, and they don't have any alternative. They've run out of alternatives.
One of the other things I want to point to is that Donald Trump, simultaneously, while supposedly going to make a deal with Vladimir Putin in order to, quote unquote, end the war, he is also just did this. This is between Pashtian and Olivier. I think that's how you pronounce it. I usually just read the name. But this is the conversation that's taking place here. Donald Trump is triumphant. Look at me, I got a big deal between these two.
Yeah.
President of the United States, the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia will now sign the joint declaration on the outcomes of the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity Summit.
That's really
They will sign
beautiful.
3 copies in English. The President of the
All right. Now, they are doing this in order to form a corridor that the United States is going to effectively take over, supposedly for 99 years. Iran is flipping out about this. Iran makes a point of saying you are effectively acting as if you're Zelensky. And I'm paraphrasing, but the mistake that Zelensky made will be minor in comparison to what you are effectively doing here. So Russia knows this is an issue. Iran knows this is an issue, especially considering that Russia has been going after Azerbaijan, or let's say criminals of Azerbaijan. The state of Azerbaijan has been having feelings about it. And Armenia, of course, feels some kind of way because Russia didn't jump to its aid when it got a mud hole stumped in it during the Nagorno-Karabakh war. This is surrounding Russia also, right? I mean, meaning if NATO expansion is the main issue, that was the driver of the war. And then Donald Trump goes around and says, and now I'm also going to expand closer to your borders and put a military presence on your border through this corridor. That looks a little dicey, right? Am I missing something?
It's supposed to be a development corridor, but you're right. It's a soft underbelly of Russia. It is the soft underbelly. The Caucasus historically have been the soft underbelly. As to what his influence was in getting them together was basically, look, if you don't work out a deal, I'm not going to trade with you, but you have all these opportunities. So once again, he's using the economic leverage to bring them in. But in terms of his influence and getting them to talk, well, it was all based on economics. And but it does reflect an influence American influence that will enter the area along with U.S. companies. So we'll see to what extent they prosper. The Armenians and the Azerbaijans, or the Azeris as we call them, to see to what extent that they actually prosper from this economic development. But it does reflect more of an encroachment of American influence in an area that has been predominantly under Russian influence all these years. And it does, and I think the idea is to develop a wedge to bust up the primary players in BRICS, as well as the SCO. So this is another subtle effort at economic warfare against the Eurasian Union that has developed here over time, and it does reflect an extension of U.S. influence.
I could be wrong, but I thought that the U.S. was using it was like military or something like that on the corridor for 99 years.
No, it's meant to be mostly economic development and build companies and factories and run pipelines and stuff like that.
Yeah. I
haven't heard any word of military bases as such being set up.
No, not bases. I didn't think it was a base. I thought it was. I need to find that part. I didn't think it was a military base. I thought it was just kind of the U.S. was effectively going to have control of it for.
Well, there'll be no doubt that there may be U.S. involvement in the and influence in there. And I'm sure undoubtedly a number of these companies will be NGOs, which will be CIA cutouts. Mm-hmm. So it's meant to influence the local populations over time toward U.S. influence, and this constitutes a potential concern to Putin, I'm sure.
Do you think Iran would actually take action in this? So one of the Iranians, his name is, if I can find the name right here, IRGC Aliyev and Pashtian's Zaigzer gamble is worse than Zelensky's mistake. He pointed out he's an IRGC political deputy General Giovanni. He warned Armenia, Prime Minister Nicole Pashinyan, and President Aliyev that their decision to involve the United States and NATO into the Caucasus, quote, an even greater mistake than Zelensky's, unquote. Giovanni said that the two leaders considered the consequences. Well, how they considered the consequences, they would not have fallen for, quote, the gamble and the risk player Trump, unquote. He compared the move to Zelensky's miscalculation to provoke Russia, only this time the fallout could be far worse. And even in some of the other commentary, they pointed out, we don't need to wait for Russia if we need to respond. Do you think Iran?
Yeah, I don't know that Iran will immediately attack. Now they've had some considerable influence in that region themselves for quite some time, and the other player who's had influence in that region, who's gone unnamed at this point, is Turkey. Turkey's influence there is great. Not to mention Israel's and Ukraine's, because of the relationship with Azerbaijan against Armenia. But the northern part of Iran is Azeris. I mean, these are Iranian people from Azerbaijan who have moved in over time into northern Iran. So it's the influence there, the Iranian influence with Azerbaijan is great. Plus, they have access to pipelines into the Caspian and what have you. So it really complicates and makes the entire Caucasus a brand new flashpoint in the very near future, given all of these players who are focusing into this region, and Russia's going to be watching it very, very carefully.
I guess that's kind of my point, right? Like. A lot of the media is talking about this.
I think they're really all bothered by the fact that the U.S. is even there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I am too. I thought we were supposed to focus on America first. Again, Trump is not in control of his own foreign policy.
But see, I think Trump would have went for this. I think this is totally up Trump's alley. He's like, hey, I can get a corridor. I can name it after Trump, corridor or peace or whatever he's going to call it, or economic prosperity.
It's all about stroking his ego. It has nothing to do with in-depth thinking and knowledge on the entire subject matter. He lacks that. He only goes by the superficial stuff of how it makes him look good and increases his popularity. And oh, by the way, I solved another potential world crisis, and I should be getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
Right. Right.
It just never ends.
If I'm not mistaken, Armenia said that, like in the state, it was like, I'm nominating Trump for the Peace Prize. Yeah,
it's getting to be a joke.
It is a joke. I mean, like the notion that you're pushing countries to nominate you for the Peace Prize.
He makes this agreement between India and Pakistan, promising them economic, if they would stop fighting, he'll do economic deals. But then he turns around and slaps a 50% tariff on India.
India said that Donald Trump had nothing to do with them coming together.
Yeah, he's right. But that was the incentive. But for their own reasons, they decided to quell the thing. But Trump took credit for that as well by saying, well, I brought an end to the conflict in India between India and Pakistan because I offered them a deal. Well, and now that deal is I'm wondering about the deal because he just slapped those tariffs on India. I mean, you don't shake one hand and then slap him with the other. That's basically what he's done.
What do you think the chances are that they use Azerbaijan and Armenia as a second front? I mean, both of these countries are on the border of Russia.
It's subtly turning into that. It actually began under the Biden administration. Now, we've always had a presence in Georgia and somewhat in Azerbaijan and in Baku and very little in Armenia. But what's intriguing is that after the Azerbaijan-Armenian shaking hands and exchanging signed agreements, the prime minister of Armenia actually called Putin and gave him a briefing, a debrief on what happened.
Did he?
Yes.
What the hell
So
is that about? What is that about?
That reflects that he is looking, even though the Armenians can't stand him, yet he's now, and he wanted to look more westward. He's now all of a sudden beginning to head back toward, looking back toward Russia a little bit. And so and the Russians have one base in Armenia now. And they've talked in the past of trying to set up a land corridor. And right now they fly everything into that base. The Russians do. What the Russians were thinking of with Georgia was establish a land bridge through Georgia to get to that base. But for now, that's been put on ice. It would go through Abkhazia, which is what they, but actually go near to Tbilisi. But it would go right down the middle of Georgia. But I haven't heard any more discussion about that recently.
Speculate for me. What is Pastor John up to? Because I don't know if I buy him. He was very salty after losing that war with Azerbaijan. Yeah. And he, on some level, seemed to blame Putin for it, despite the fact that it's like, dude, you don't have any claim to Nagorno-Karabakh. Like, you've never made the claim to it, nor basically the rest of the world sees this as the Azeris. So,
well, frankly, notwithstanding this so-called agreement between the two countries,
yeah,
Nagorno-Karabakh still remains a contentious issue. It was never resolved into this. So it still remains on the table as a contentious issue. You still have Armenians who were living there, and
yes,
and you know they've been that way for quite some time. They refused to move. Now Azerbaijan had a war. What was it, last year with the Armenians, and won, and was supposed to be kicking out all the Armenians. But apparently that hasn't all transpired just yet. I guess they're still working on arrangements to vacate the Armenians who have lived there for generations. But it's you don't hear that much about it, but it still is a contentious issue between those two countries, and it could flare up again. There's no guarantee with any of these arrangements that anything's going to work out permanently. I mean, none of these agreements, they could turn tomorrow, and I think the same is going to happen between Trump and Putin. There's so much mistrust today between leaders. That's why your leaders do not negotiate, which is what's happening here. They come in and just sign the agreement that the lower staff people worked out an arrangement.
Right.
But that's not what's happening here. So who do you appeal to if you can't agree? You go to war ultimately. Or it'll be status quo and things will just rumble along. But U.S. cannot afford to continue to supply Ukraine. Now, what we're seeing here is a difference without a distinction occurring. We heard J.D. Vance say, well, look, we're not going to be supplying Ukraine anymore with arms. Yet, he's saying, well, the Europeans can buy arms, we'll manufacture them, and then the Europeans can give them to the Ukrainians.
Yes.
You know, as I say, it's a difference without a distinction. And I think that still keeps us in the fray indirectly.
Yeah, I mean, Trump wants to pivot to China. He wants Europe to be able to take over the responsibility.
Yeah, he wants to pivot elsewhere. He's got the Caucasus to worry about.
The Caucasus.
But I think the influence, historically the influences in the region are going to be overtaken by the Turks and ultimately and even by the Iranians. I just don't see where U.S. influence is. I think U.S. influence in that region over the long run could be rather limited. I may be wrong, but they just are out of place. It's not their area of influence.
Yeah.
And Iran and Turkey have historical influence in that region.
Mhm. We'll see. We will
Yeah.
see. Right now, Iran is flipping out. They're losing it.
Well, yeah. Well, they feel a little picked upon right now. They just got bombed, and
Well, there's that, right? There's that.
yeah.
Michael Maloof.
But they can withstand. But they're going to stand up to any. I don't envision Trump bombing them again, and at the same time, there's no more talk of sanctions against the Iranians unless the Europeans do snapbacks based upon the lack of compliance of the old JCPOA, which the U.S. dropped out of in 2018. So the fact that Iran is in BRICS is pivotal in the SCO to Russia and China makes it and they have developed this way around Western sanctions. I think in the long run is going to serve them better because it helps them to become self-sufficient and they develop an alternative to the Western system, which was imposed upon them anyway, and which has been used as an economic weapon over time against them. And I think they have found a way now to get around that.
Michael Maloof. Michael Maloof is a former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, and regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service in the U.S. Department of Defense, and he is a damn good friend of the show. Michael, thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You have a good one. Be safe.
Yep. Thank
All
you.
right.